Thank you, Beth. Welcome, folks, to this month's meeting of the Culinary Historians of Ann Arbor. I'm Randy Schwartz with the CHAA. We're pleased that you can join us, whether in person or online, for today's talk on classic Michigan food and drinks. I want to thank our host for today's program, the Ann Arbor District Library, which provides promotional and technical support for us. They also make it possible for our programs to be shared beyond the walls of the library by live streaming them and by recording and posting many of them on the library's YouTube channel. For the new viewers and visitors today, I want to briefly introduce you to the Culinary Historians. The CHAA is an informal group, as you can tell. We bring together all sorts of people interested in the history and culture of food and cooking. The group was founded way back in 1983, and new members are always welcome. We have monthly talks like this one from September to May. Some of them have in-person speakers like these two. Others are where the speaker zooms in. We also have twice yearly participatory theme meals, one in July and one in November or December. So we just had one 2 weeks ago called Comfort Us with Apples. People cooked and baked apple dishes drawn from traditions across the country and around the world. And we gathered together to eat them and learn about them in the opposite order. Last July, our theme was wedding foods from around the world. So these theme meals are always very fun. It's another benefit of membership. If you're not a member, we'd love to have you join. Our membership is only $25 a year for an individual or a couple, and it includes a subscription to our quarterly magazine, Repast.
Very good.
A postal subscription to Repast by itself is only $20 a year, no matter what country you happen to live in. I'm saying that for the benefit of the online folks.
Yeah.
If you'd like to join our group or just to subscribe to Repast, you can find the information on our website, culinaryhistoriansannarbor.org. Click on the membership tab there. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for Culinary Historians of Ann Arbor and like our page and get our news into your timeline. Or if you're here in person, you can pick up a membership form on the rear table there after the Q&A session. And by the way, for those watching this program online, if you'd like to ask the speakers a question, you can type it into the chat section, and we'll try to convey that to the speakers. After the Q&A today, we'll have an author signing with Gail and John, who've brought copies of their new book for sale in the rear table in the rear. Also, for refreshments, we brought some classic snacks from Michigan companies.
Nice.
Better made potato chips, biscuits made with Jiffy mix,
Wow.
some almond butter made by Germac. Germac is celebrating its 100th anniversary
right,
this
yeah.
year. Germac Nuts in Detroit. And to wash it all down, we have some Faygo Pop and Vernors ginger ale.
Right on.
So help yourselves to that after the program. Our talk next month, 6 weeks from today, on Sunday, January 19th, same room, same time, will be about preserving the past, 18th century food preservation. A talk by Susan McClellan Plaisted, who's an expert in historical cooking and a longtime teacher and demonstrator of it at her business, Heart to Hearth Cookery in Morrisville, Pennsylvania. So she'll be zooming in for this program. We look forward to that and to seeing all of you back with us, whether in person or online. And now, finally, I'm pleased to introduce today's speakers. Gail Offen and John Milan are local historians and authors and longtime friends of the Culinary Historians. They've given a number of talks for us now. John works as a lecturer, journalist, and photographer and Gail's had a career as an advertising creative director and an adjunct professor at Lawrence Technological University. These two have published books, either individually or as a team, about Grand River Avenue, the Old Chicago Road, haunted places in Michigan, iconic restaurants of Ann Arbor, Detroit in the ragtime and jazz ages, and their brand new book, hot off the press, published last month, is Classic Michigan Food and Drinks, The Stories Behind the Brands. So without further ado, would you please join me in welcoming Gail and John?
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are these working now? Okay, yeah. Oh, the tech people say, hello, everybody, and thanks for coming out and not shopping or putting up Christmas decorations today. We appreciate it. And we want to thank Randy and everyone in the CHAA for inviting us here. You know, we got connected with them when we wrote our book, Iconic Restaurants of Ann Arbor, which is recently out of print, we found out, because it's all color and it's expensive to print color books. So we hope we can republish it again someday. But of course, the lovely Susan Weinberg, Randy, and the late Jan Langoni were very big helps in doing our research. And so John and I, as Randy said, we love food and we love Michigan. And as we started to think about what to do for a new book, we were startled to find out there were so many game changers, I will call it, from Michigan. You know, everybody knows, you know, ready-to-eat cereal and baby food, but there's a lot of other surprises that we're going to tell you about. And I do want to say that we could probably talk for a couple of hours, and so we're going to just tell you a few stories, but there's 140 brands in the book, and if you want more stories, just invite us over for dinner. We'll regale you or bore you for hours, but believe me, we have a lot of passion for this, so we could keep talking endlessly, but we know you have things to do, so we'll keep it to a reasonable length. So with that, you can see where we started. This is the cover of our new book. It just came out 3 weeks ago, wow. And we're having fun promoting it. So John's going to take you through the Michigan's other big three.
Right. Everyone knows, of course, that Michigan has the big three, auto industry. We have the other big three as well. These are brands that are known the world over, and they are, in fact, game changers. They're products that really didn't exist before. And we'll start with the cereal capital of the world. Everyone knows that that's Grand Rapids. Why is Grand Rapids the cereal capital of the world?
Battle Creek.
Battle Creek. Why am I wrong? Why is Battle Creek the cereal capital?
It has a lot of good stores, too.
Let's get back to Battle Creek. Why is Battle Creek the cereal capital of the world? Because, talk about cause and effect, because it was the home of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1863. And this gave birth to what we call the cereal wars. But let's move ahead here, and let's look at how it all began. James and Ellen White founded the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1863, and they were a church with strict dietary laws, somewhat neo-kosher, and in many cases they practiced vegetarianism. Now, they also had other diet and exercise regimens, so they started the Western Reform Health Institute in 1866, which they called the SAN. And in the 1870s, they hired John Harvey Kellogg, he's a doctor, to run the SAN, and John brought his brother Will Keith along as an accountant and bookkeeper. Now, together, they started to really promote the place, and John was quite a character. He had, as you may well know, a regimen of very unorthodox treatments. Yeah, you'd get up every day and do these exercises. You'd eat certain foods they prepared there, but he would also subject you to some really interesting things like, vibrating chairs, yogurt enemas. He would put electric current through your eyeballs. If you've ever seen The Road to Wellville or read the book, you'll learn a lot about what John Kellogg did. And he was very strict about his adherence to the rules. In fact, he was celibate in a 41-year-old marriage, and he had 8 children adopted. And he practiced what he preached. But his brother, Will, was a little bit more interested in profit and entrepreneurship. They together discovered cornflakes in 1894. How'd they do that, Gail?
Well, it was actually an accident. They left out some corn mush one day, and they started scraping it. It was crunchy and crispy. Voila, the cornflakes was invented.
That's right. Now, this is great. You know, they found out that these were very popular with the residents, And so John said, let's sell these. Let's start a company called Sanitas because they start at the sand. And anybody who's been here can order these cornflakes no matter where they live. And Will Keith said, yeah, I don't think so. I think everybody ought to buy these. I think we'll make a lot of money. And he went ahead and he started his own company, and he added sugar and he added enhanced flavor, and he tried to, enhance the shelf life. This was, of course, the straw that broke the camel's back. And after some lawsuits, these two brothers never spoke to each other again, but Will started the Kellogg Toasted Cornflake Company.
And that's why we have Fruit Loops. So we can thank Will that we have Fruit Loops, because John was not having it. So here is the other company we all know about, C.W. Post. What a character this guy was. A great marketer, though. He was a guy who was sickly throughout most of his life. He actually went to the Kellogg Sand, wasn't cured there. So he went on to form other food products. But I have to say, when I looked up some of his inventions, one of the things he got a patent for was something called scientific suspenders.
Right.
If anybody knows what those were, please let me know. I want to know how suspenders can be scientific. So he invented some of the famous products we know now, and some of them were almost by accident. But he decided, and believe me, I don't believe this, that coffee was the evil of the world, and he set out to invent a beverage that had no caffeine and no chicory, because chicory was bitter. He came up with Postum. Now, and that was made out of wheat and molasses. That became a huge hit among people who did not want to drink coffee, and apparently it cured nervous prostration and something called brain fag. It cured, they said it even cured appendicitis. That was a huge success. Then he went on to invent grape nuts. Remember, Jerry Seinfeld said, grape nuts, what's the deal? No grapes, no nuts. Actually, grape nuts is made out of barley and wheat, and I always wondered about this name. They thought for some reason when they made it, it produced something called grape sugar. And that's why he came up with the name Grape Nuts. I know, not a great thing, but that's the story. And another one of his very famous products was something he called Elijah's Manna, which caused a great deal of commotion because look at the religious connotations here. So they made him change the name too. You got to Post Toasties.
Just as a point of order, too, I should say that just like billionaires fight with each other, at this point, Kellogg and Post were fighting with each other in court.
Especially over cornflakes, because that was the most popular thing. But he was a brilliant marketer. C.W. Post spent, imagine this, the turn of the century, he spent $1 million on advertising. He got the word out and was incredibly popular. But here's his daughter here that maybe you've heard of, Marjorie Merriweather Post. He led her into the company early. By the age of 10, she was going to board meetings, like most 10-year-olds do. But she was a pretty smart cookie, as we like to say, because after her father died, when she was 27 years old, she inherited the company and went on to form, you've heard of the General Foods Company. Right. So here she quickly brought all these companies that she thought would be successful: Bird's Eye, Sanka, Baker's Cocoa, Jell-O, Hellman's Mayonnaise, Maxwell House, and others, along with her husband, E.F. Hutton. Remember those commercials, E.F. Hutton? And she went on to become, obviously, General Foods, a huge success. She bought a little place in Florida called Mar-a-Lago, named it Mar-a-Lago, and enough said about that. So, whoops. So those are the big three. Now, some of you saw the picture over there, right, John?
That's right. I just want you to realize how much research we put into this. Gail and I started in about 1967. And here I am in our first research project journey. My daughter will tell you this is the last time I ever wore short pants.
That's true. And here I am with my brother and my cousin. Anybody here go to the Kellogg's factory when they were kids?
Oh,
a lot
right.
of you. That was a thing. They don't allow tours anymore. When we found this, when we were contacting all these companies, even Jiffy, some of you may have gone on the Jiffy tour, they don't even offer tours anymore. Yeah. But when you're a little kid and you get those snack packs, remember those, and you wear that little hat and then you get a Fruit Loop sundae, this is like the greatest day of your life. So there I am holding up my snack packs proudly, and John and I might have been there the same day. We don't know. We didn't know each other back then.
No idea.
So here's another one of what we call the big three. So many people don't realize that Gerber was in Fremont, Michigan, and that is a really important category here. They invented commercial baby food. Now, back in the 20s, Commercial baby food was available only by prescription. It was very expensive, so women had to make their own baby food. This is before hippies made their own baby food. This is when nobody really wanted to make their own baby food. So what happened is Mr. Gerber, Dan Gerber, owned a canning factory. And there's a couple stories of how this whole category got started. One that we like is that Dan Gerber and his wife Dorothy were going out for the evening, and she was straining baby food because her pediatrician recommended strained baby food. She was straining it, they were late, and he said, come on, let's go. And she said, well, if you think this is so easy, you do it. And he went and did it in the factory. He started to make cans of baby food. Oh, just go back for 1 second. I want to point out that they were starting out in cans. And here's the first ones: prunes, carrots, vegetable soup, peas, and spinach. So he started making this baby food at his factory, and the people that worked there started taking it home to their children, and their children liked it. And before you knew it, it was an industry. In 1929, it became commercially available, and people all over the world, here's Dorothy Gerber herself, and this became a huge worldwide sensation. And during World War II, because there was a metal shortage, they switched to the iconic glass little jars that we know now. And Dorothy went on to have a column. She was like Dr. Spock, and she answered questions about babies for many, many years.
But the biggest mystery associated with Gerber
Okay, go ahead.
was, who is the Gerber baby?
Oh,
And
yeah.
who was the Gerber baby?
Woo.
People thought it was Humphrey Bogart or Elizabeth Taylor and a whole bunch of people, but it turns out it was Ann Turner Cook. And she was actually painted or drawn by a commercial artist named Dorothy Hope Smith.
Just passed away a couple years ago.
Just a couple
but you
years
can-
ago. So mystery solved.
Yeah.
All right.
You can win a bar bet on that one. Well,
Now-
we have a lot of other Michigan specialties in the book. We're just going to give you a little taste of each one of them, but here are some of the things that we're noted for: jams and fudge and pasties and pickles. And by the way, I have to say, I wore a hairnet for 2 years by going to all these companies. There I am in a hairnet there. We went to a lot of these companies and saw them making things. Here I am at American Spoon, watching them make jam. It was really wonderful to tour around the country, around the state. Okay, you guys, here's one of my favorite stories in this whole book. This guy, his name is Paul Mihalchik. It's a Czech name. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. His grandmother started to make jam back in the late 1800s and sell it by the side of the road. This is up in Eagle River, which is way up in the UP. And his specialty at the Jam Lady is thimbleberry. Has anybody ever had thimbleberry jam? A surprising number.
very few.
Thimbleberries
Okay.
are very tiny little raspberries, and they grow in cool and shady spots, perfect in the UP, and they're wild foraged. Almost everything the Jam Lady sells is wild foraged. And it's kind of like with morels. Everybody has their own secret spot that they grow them, and they all have to be gathered. And it's fairly expensive because they're so tiny, these berries. They're wonderful and tart. But this guy, okay, so he told me this story about once he had to fend off a bear while he was picking thimbleberries, and he said it was a damn good patch of berries, so I just stood up to the bear. But this is my favorite thing. If you ever go, and my cousin just went there in the summer. This is the store. Okay, nobody's in the store. There's jam. If you want jam, you go in the store, you get the jam, and you put money in like a cigar box. It's totally the honor system. And then in the winter, this is my favorite part. You know, a lot of snow up there in the UP. There's a shovel by the door. And if you want jam in the winter, you shovel that door and you go in, put your money in the cigar box, and you get jam. So
I'm
it's
running to the store. I'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. You can order online, but it's not as fun. But I highly, highly, for artisanal, unusual jam, recommend the Jam Lady. Now, fudge. Oh, boy.
Here's
We
about...
ate every brand of fudge on Mackinac Island. Our
Right.
cardiologists are furious.
That's right. And I'll tell you, there's 3 important facts you need to know about Mackinac Island. One, it was the very second national park,
yes.
second national park in America, and it became one of Michigan's first state parks in the 1890s. But more important than all of them, it is the fudge capital
Yes.
of the entire world.
Yes.
That's not a
of the
joke,
world.
folks. The fudge capital of the world. And there are 13 fudge stores on Mackinac Island, including the oldest fudge manufacturer in the country or the world.
Which is maize.
Yep, and the oldest on the island, which is Murdoch's.
Right.
Now, you say, how did it, wait a minute, what? Well, actually, May started in Kansas City and then moved to the island. That's how that happened. But if you go online and you type in Murdoch's, you'll find there's more than 11 Murdoch's fudge manufacturers or makers in Michigan. And guess what? They're not the same company. You go to one and say, I had this at this place. They go, no, I don't know what you're talking about. There's only a relationship between three of them, and they're not the same company either. So
Right.
we kind of dispel that
And
mystery.
the family is fighting, and we call it the fudge fight. They're all fighting about the name. It's really
That's
actually
right.
very, very
Yeah.
fun.
I'm a Murdoch. Now, the fudge king of Mackinac Island is Harry Ryba. And Harry Ryba actually started his fudge making operation in Detroit in the 1930s. But he went to Mackinac Island. He had a little trouble telling that he made Mackinac Island fudge when he came from Detroit, but he had the kind of personality that said, I'm going to do whatever I want. And he started the whole idea of making the fudge in the window and blowing the smell, that sweet, wonderful
Brilliant
smell.
marketing idea because now they all do it. He was the first guy. They all make fudge in the window,
Yeah.
but he was the first guy to do that and
And-
blowing it on the street.
And he coined the term fudgy. And
Yeah.
fudgy was anybody that came to the island, took a bicycle or carriage ride, and left the island the same day with a box of fudge
Yeah.
under their arm.
A box of Ryba fudge. And very few people know that, but Ryba or Ryba is Polish for fish. Now, I don't think people want us to associate fish with fudge, but that's my little.
We hope they don't have a
Fun fact
fish-flavored
from
fudge.
that,
I don't know. But Michigan is also the pickle capital of the country. We have all of the cucumbers that you use
We
for
grow
pickling.
the most pickled cucumbers, the kind of cucumbers that makes pickles, are all grown in the thumb,
Yep.
and that's the most in the country, right?
Right. And the largest pickle processing plant in the world is in Holland, Michigan, and has been there since 1897. It's actually run by a non-Michigan maker called Heinz. We
Yeah.
know what that is, right?
And many of you know Vlasic pickles. Some of you here might have even worked on it. And a company called Donor, an advertising agency, came up with that Groucho Marx. This is the best tasting pickle I ever hoyed. Remember that with crunching it? That became iconic, and they're still using it to this day, Vlasic.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so here's my favorite pickle, and Beth and I are simpatico about this. Toper's Pickles, a Jewish fermented pickle, and there's not a drop of vinegar in it. This is a way that my grandmother made pickles, and this is actually a grandmother's recipe. I'm posed here with Larry Toper, who lived across the street from me growing up in Southfield, and he always smelled a little like pickles, I have to confess. And here's Larry and I reuniting after all these years. His father owned a deli. The deli didn't do so well, but everyone loved the pickles, and it was his grandmother's recipe. Lily, she brought it over from Russia, and they started making these wonderful fermented pickles, and they are really some of the best pickles. But Larry was telling us, for years, he was the jar tightener. They didn't have automatic jar tightener. He's the guy, he said, I invented carpal tunnel. And he had these huge hands, and they used to tighten the jars. So we'll tell you a little more about who owns it now, but Larry Toper is still making pickles, and Beth says you can get them at Arbor Farms and a lot of, only
Only
Bushes.
Bushes,
Oh, you can only
okay.
get them at Bushes. They're really wonderful.
Now, another mainstay in Michigan is the pasty. And you can get all kinds of pasties, but they originated in the Cornwall district of England, and the miners enjoyed pasties for a variety of reasons, mostly because they made for a quick lunch, and they could use the braided rope crust as a handle so they wouldn't get their food all dirty. And Gail will tell you they also would put them on their shovel and bake them over a fire on their shovel. Now, we encountered a lot of pasty makers. Leto's is great because they had this captive audience waiting to use the ferry before the Mackinac Bridge was built. They would go up and down the line and say, would you like some pasties? Would you like some pasties?
And there's a big controversy, gravy or no gravy. At the UP, they call gravy troll sauce, meaning anybody who likes gravy is from under the bridge, therefore you're a troll. They eat them with ketchup. The debate is still open. By the way, that's one of the things we loved about this book. We love debates. We love debates about what's the best pasty, what's the best fudge. We
Right.
love hearing arguments about food. And Michigan dairy, of course, a lot of the famous ones around here, Guernsey, Calder. Calder still delivers to Ann Arbor. Do you guys realize that? Some of you get milk delivered from Calder's?
Oh, wow.
Wow, we'll show you later about, you can visit the Calder Farm, which is amazing. We'll get to that at the end.
But here we go, folks. Just so you know that Pinconning
Welcome
is the
to
cheese
Pinconning.
capital of Michigan. If you didn't know that, look at the sign. Cheese capital of Michigan.
Near Frankenmuth.
Yeah. Now, Dan Horn brought Pinconning cheese, or actually created Pinconning cheese in Michigan. It's actually Colby cheese, but it's a little different, and it's a very mild cheese. But he came to Michigan by way of Russia and through Wisconsin, and he had two daughters, and he started making his Pinconning cheese. There's the two daughters. It's Evelyn and Inez, and they grew up right around the factory the father made, and they got married, and they started their own shop. Evelyn started the Pinconning cheese shop, and Inez went across the street, and she started Wilson's Cheese Shop, named after her husband, obviously. And they're still there. And strangely enough, they're different families, but they're still related to each other. How's that? And they call the mouse Inez.
The mouse we see here, that's one of your... Yeah. And it's really a fun place to go. It's a very Michigan thing to go to Pinconning.
Right.
Now we have a chapter on what we call baked delights. Very few people realize that Archway actually started in Michigan. That it's still in business. And this time of year, love those windmill cookies, right? The Steenstra cookies from the west side of the state. And John, of course, is wearing Ories. And this tells you something about writing a book. We started writing this book 2 years ago. What was our first interview? Ories. By the time we finished the book, they were out of business. Please don't blame us. But it's sort of shocking to think that this is, many of you grew up eating Ori products. And they started in 1910. They actually came from Canada. And they started to go around the neighborhood with baked goods in a little wheelbarrow, selling it to people. And then they hired people to sell it. Do you know that they had 160 stores in Michigan? They became such a huge bakery. And of course, supermarkets would have an Ories thing. And it's very sad. We did not really realize that. We thought somebody would buy them in the end, but nobody did. And most people remember their wonderful Long John coffee cake. It was a yeasted butter cake with a streusel on top. That's one of the things people loved. And of course, their date nut bars as well. But a lot of people have fond memories of growing up with Ori.
And here's something you may not know.
If you weren't listening till now, this is the most startling fact in the book.
That's right. I don't know how many of you have ever put your hand into that frozen food bin and grabbed some Kohl's frozen garlic bread, but it is a Michigan product.
Michigan invented frozen garlic bread. Come on, folks.
Here it is.
That's amazing.
Now, it's an interesting story. L. Carroll Cole started a baking company in Muskegon in the 1940s, and he basically just made your average baked goods, and he supplied grocery stores in the Muskegon area. His chief salesman was a man named Wes Devon. There he is right there. And Wes was finding business a little bit slow because all of a sudden the grocery stores started having in-house bakeries. So he said, maybe we could try something a little different. And he came up with the idea of frozen garlic bread, where you would take it right out of the freezer, put it in the oven, and voila, it had the butter and everything all ready, and it just took off. In fact, they had the mainstay in the marketplace for many, many years until Pepperidge Farm and a few other people tried to compete with them. So
be proud, Michigan. We invented frozen garlic bread.
That's
okay,
right.
It's a very proud moment for us.
Now, Wes, the salesman, ended up taking over the company, and his son is in charge now.
Yeah, it's still a family business.
Ooh.
Here's one of my favorite products, Trenary Toast, and I love the origin story of this. Up in the UP, of course, there was a lot of mining going on, especially in the early 1900s. And there were a lot of European people that came over to work in the mines, especially people from Finland. And they brought with them this cookie that is called a karppu, and I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right, and Lars can probably straighten me out on that. It's a rusk, so a very, very dry cookie and with cinnamon on it. And a bakery started making them commercially called Trenary Toast in 1928. And it's got a shelf life of 365 days. So that's a good thing, too. But babies teethe with it because it's so hard and so crunchy. But the best way to eat it is dipping it in a little bit of coffee. It's really wonderful. It comes in all kinds of flavors. You can find it all over. But our favorite thing is the last Saturday in February, they have called the Outhouse Classic. If you want to go up to Trenary, they make all these outhouses. They put them on skis, and they ski them down it's CUP, you guys. And they ski them down the main road there, and it's a fun-looking festival. I think that would actually be a lot of fun, and you can eat a lot of...
And a lot of public bathrooms. Oh. Now, we're also famous for a lot of fascinating meat products in Michigan,
Again,
of course.
these are other things that are in the book. Yeah.
Kowalski and Kogel served this curb. And, of course, we created the ballpark Frank.
And if you're ever in Three Oaks, Michigan, there's a wonderful meat store called Dryers that's been around there since right after the Civil War. It's a great place to stop. But we're going to talk about Cy Ginsberg. Who loves a good corned beef or pastrami sandwich? All right.
Everybody.
Yeah,
All
with
right.
the Topper's pickle.
Not a lot of vegetarians
if you love
here.
a good, fatty, luscious, salty corned beef sandwich, you have this man to thank, Cy Ginsberg. Cy Ginsberg started out with a deli actually near me where I grew up in Southfield in the 70s, and he hated the deli business, but he loved the meat part of it. He started his own meat curing in a butcher shop in Pontiac in 1980 called United Meat. Well, the connection to Ann Arbor, folks, is that he was the guy who started selling corned beef to Zingerman's. In fact, he taught Paul and Ari how to cook the corned beef, how to slice the corned beef, and he made the first sandwich at Zingerman's. He even told him how to slice the bread, where to get the bread. He is like the deli maven. He's known all throughout the country, and what he does now is he goes around the country and he helps open delis. He loves to do that, and then he says, then I wash the grease off my hands and I go on to the next deli. He's a wonderful man. We got to interview him.
No headaches.
But here's what I want to say about this from a culinary point of view. So Jewish corned beef has a different flavor profile than Irish, what we'll call Irish corned beef, or the kind of corned beef you get in supermarkets. Jewish corned beef, the spices that are used are different, and it uses a lot of garlic and onions. But there's a company called Grobel that makes the corned beef that you eat on St. Patrick's Day that's available in supermarkets. That has a different flavor profile. It uses mustard seed, it uses cloves, completely different taste. But this man here, Jason Grobel, his great-grandfather started the business in 1883 in the Eastern Market. He bought up both Topper's and Cy Ginsberg. And so even though Cy and Larry Topper still work for him, this company now owns them, but it's great. He's keeping these heritage brands going. And so this company sells 25 million pounds of corned beef a year, and most of it in the first quarter because of St. Patrick's Day. Okay. Now, there's a lot of immigrant stories in the book, 313 Urban Chips, and Shatila Bakery. We talk about a lot of those things, but the story I want to tell you about that's a little close to home is, of course, Al Dente Pasta. Many of you know about Al Dente Pasta, and it was started by Monique Deschênes. Some of you might know her. She started it, remember Complete Cuisine, the kitchen store that used to be in Ann Arbor. She worked there, and she wanted to make a homemade pasta that was dry but still tasted like homemade pasta. So Monique, in the back of the store, she would make pasta at night, and then she said she would pray it would dry by morning. And she got a lot of help from all the chefs that came through. And I remember a lot of famous chefs. Marcella Hazan actually gave her pasta making lessons. Sandy Cooper introduced her to a lot of the different chefs that came through Ann Arbor. She moved the store to Whitmore Lake and started making pasta there. In the beginning, her husband had a windsurfing business, and he said that when he used to go to trade shows, his windsurfing, the wetsuits always smelled like garlic because she was making pasta. But obviously, Al Dente is a huge success. It's still going strong in those clear bags. And she went from making a pound of pasta a day to 5,000 pounds of pasta a day. And that's still available.
That's right. Now, our next segment we call Nuts, Nut Butters, Chips, and Snacks. And we cover a lot of ground with those. There's a lot of great products there. The most famous, of course, is Better Made. And Gail and I went to Better Made.
That was
we
fun.
were the guest of the owner. Actually, it's still owned in the family.
This is on Gratiot on the east side of Detroit. It's been there since 1930.
That's right. And it was actually started in 1930 by Sicilian cousins. One was working for what was eventually the New Era potato chip company, and they had a reorganization, and he ended up with a delivery truck and a recipe for chips, and the other guy from Sicily had some capital. So they got together and they created Better Made potato chips. their system really, which used Michigan potatoes and salt, would actually transform a potato into a chip in 7 minutes.
It's such a Michigan story because they have a secret proprietary potato grown for them by Michigan State. It's called a chipping potato. And as John said, they use Michigan salt. They even use Michigan packaging. But I have to tell you, folks, this may be the second greatest day of my life, eating a potato chip right out of the fryer. It spoils you for just eating regular potato chips. This is a major moment for but Better Made is a really a beloved Detroit brand.
And served by the owners.
Yes, and served to me by the owners. That's right. Yeah. And another great story, and Randy mentioned Germac, they're celebrating their 100th anniversary. These are another game changer. This is the first company to import pistachios to America. In 1924, the Germac brothers here, they started importing pistachios. Now, back then, when you picked pistachios, your fingers would leave a little oil mark on there, so they dyed them red. Does everybody remember red pistachios?
Oh,
and
yeah.
why were they, they'd make your hands all red. They called them red lip pistachios. And here's another clever marketing thing by these guys. They sent vending machines across the country to grocery stores, and they would send them 5-pound bags of these red pistachios, and they were the only people who could refill them, so you had to go back and get the pistachios from them. And it was important during the Depression. You could get a handful of protein, some nuts for a penny, and it became a very important food substance. So anyway, now they don't dye them anymore. They stopped dyeing them in the 70s, but we went to the Germac plant, saw them roasting the nuts. They have a different recipe for each nut, and they supply the peanuts to the Lions, the Tigers, and all the other sports teams.
You can get the red ones at Christmas time.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
They're
right.
very nostalgic. But yes, they were the first to bring pistachios.
Now, there's a lot of chocolatiers around the state of Michigan. Some of them are quite far away, and some of them are right close to home, and we found so many great ones. This one's called Gilbert.
We decided to tell you about this one because very few people know about them, and they have a store at Briarwood. This is a fantastic company. They have been making chocolates, not these people, but since the 1850. This guy actually predated, his name was John Gilbert. This is in Jackson. He predated Milton Hershey in inventing different forms of chocolate. He used recipes, and they've been making chocolate for years. And if you go to their store, this is one of the few places you can get a tour. And if you go to their store in Jackson, you can see them making chocolate. It's hard to see, but this is the caramel guillotine. They actually have a guillotine, and they have their chocolate melter is 120 years old. They use a lot of antique equipment, and they're wonderful. But one of the things they're really noted for, here's a fact that'll blow your mind. The Ritz cracker was invented in Jackson, Michigan by the Jackson Cracker Company. And it was the prototype for the Ritz cracker, and they sold it, regrettably, to Nabisco in 1919, and of course, the rest is history. But in honor of that, the Gilbert Company makes something called the Caramel Tin, the Ritz Caramel Tin. It's a Ritz cracker with caramel on top and covered in chocolate. And it's really wonderful. And again, you can go to Briarwood to their store and get their chocolate, and you could also go to Jackson and tour the factory.
And you can see this is where the chocolate factory is, and that's where the Ritz crackers were invented, right next door. So they kept it close to home. Now, of course, here in Michigan, we call it pop. We, of course, looked at some of the great soda pops in Michigan. Vernors is now officially the oldest soda pop in America, and it's actually the oldest soda pop in the world. Of course, Schweppes is older, but they didn't flavor their pop then. Now, Vernors was invented by a Civil War veteran named James Vernor. There he is. He was the first registered pharmacist in the state of Michigan, and he had a shop right on Woodward. Now, if you go to Warby Parker on Woodward, right where that shop was, you can still get a free Vernors there. So, they kind of pay tribute to it. But over the years, he got into the soda pop business full time. I might mention he had a lot of different flavors, but the one that really took off was the ginger one. And over time, he had soda fountains. And if you go to Flint, there's still one of the soda
It's the
pop.
last remaining soda fountain in a Halo Burger place. But
That's right.
Not open right
But
now.
that's how they were designed. And you can still go in there and see the filigreed iron that says V for Vernors and all that.
Now, we all love a good Boston cooler, Vernors Ginger Ale and vanilla ice cream. And Aretha Franklin, this was her favorite way to make a Christmas ham, was to baste it in Vernors. Very easy to do, so check it out. We couldn't put that in the book because we thought her estate might sue us, so we're just telling you that. We just didn't want to put the words Aretha Franklin in our book, just to be on the safe side. And of course, Faygo, a wonderful, anybody who went to the Hastings Street exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum learned about the Fagenson brothers. This is in the old Jewish neighborhood. They actually were bakers, and there was not a lot of money in baking, so they decided to make pop. And because they were bakers, the first flavors were fruit flavors that they used to flavor their cake icings. So fruit punch and grape and strawberry were the first flavors of Faygo. And the name, the Fagenson brothers shortened the name to Faygo in 1921. And here's one of their early plants there, an old bottle of that. And fruit punch, grape, and strawberry. They added more flavors. And also Rock and Rye, it was named after a popular drink during the 20s. It was rye whiskey with a little rock in it. And of course, they went on to have many more flavors. And they did great business during Prohibition because people turned to this, of course, instead of liquor, or so they said. And just a few more things. When's the last time you had a good slug of a Red Pop? And if anybody remembers, the Faygo Kid was part of their advertising.
And now it's kind of a national brand.
Yeah, and it's in 33 states now, actually. You can
Right.
get Faygo all across the country. Okay, this is one of my favorite stories in the book because very few people know about it. And look, it's in front of the Michigan Theater.
There you are.
If you've ever seen these trucks, Leonard Syrups, you always wonder, are they going to a pancake breakfast? Why is there a syrup truck? This is actually the #1 company that provides pop syrups and CO2 to make fountain drinks. You've had Leonard Syrups probably anytime you went to a restaurant, you just didn't know. So they provide the carbonation and the syrup for the pop you drink, and they make their own pop as well. It started in 1964. It's a family-run company. They're all over the state. But the greatest fact is, at the Detroit Zoo, the monkeys will only drink Leonard's grape juice, and they will not drink any other kind of grape juice. Monkeys are very particular. And so Leonard's grape juice are very proud of the fact that the monkeys
Well, they
get the
don't
grape juice.
drink anything.
See, it's a fun fact of a place you did not know.
Right. A lot of great coffee makers are housed or formed
Yes.
in Michigan.
Right?
And one of them is close to home here, right, Gail?
Tom Isaiah. This really brings me back here. Who used to go to the Blind Pig in the heyday? Oh, Lars, your hand went way up. Here's Tom Isaiah, and there's Jerry. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Del Gudici? Yeah. They started the Blind Pig, and the library ties into this because before they opened the Blind Pig, Tom came to this very library. He wanted an espresso machine. Nobody was selling espresso machines. He looked in the yellow pages, the Manhattan yellow pages here at the library, and then he went to New York and he bought an espresso machine and brought it back here. And they opened up the Blind Pig. They were the first place in Ann Arbor to serve espresso, mentioned in this book here. And the Blind Pig was so iconic. And after they closed the Blind Pig, Tom still was very into coffee, and he was selling espresso machines, and he decided to open his own company, Mountain Country Roasting Company, and it became Coffee Express. And at first he sold his beans where? Kitchen Port. Remember Kitchen Port? They used to sell gourmet beans. They called it gourmet beans or specialty beans. And Tom then went very heavily into roasting, went all around the world, has relationships with coffee growers across the world, a great guy, and he continues to roast coffee. Now it's in Plymouth. But it all started at the Blind Pig. And by the way, Monique Deshane from El Dante Pasta was the chef at the Blind Pig, and she told us they didn't actually have a kitchen. They had a hot plate and a toaster oven. And all that wonderful food you got at the Blind Pig, she made down in the basement in that thing. So it all kind of ties together, but it's a wonderful Ann Arbor story about coffee.
That's right. Now, one of our last sections, it encompasses a great bunch of different topics: sugars, spices, mixes, seasonings, and condiments. And the most famous one is close by, right? Jiffy Mix. Jiffy Mix is, of course, the most...
It's the #1 dry grocery brand in America, the corn muffin mix. All across America, this is like the #1 dry grocery.
Now, this is Mabel
brand.
White Holmes. She and her husband Howard They were both coming from milling families for almost 200 years, and they established the mill in Chelsea. And in the 1920s, they had twin boys who brought a friend home for lunch. And he had brought his own lunch, and his father was a single dad, and he had made biscuits for his son. And Mabel said that when he emptied the bag and the biscuits came out, she said they looked like dried hockey pucks. So she felt sorry for the boy. She knew that his father was a single dad, so she mixed up a batch of pre-mixed grains and so forth and said, you tell your dad just to add milk to this, and he'll have really nice biscuits every day. Well, within a week, the dad was sending him back for another bag of that stuff, and word got out, and everybody else wanted it too. So finally, she said, why don't we just make this all the time?
Yeah.
And her husband retooled the mills. So you look at the next page here, and you can see that they had revolutionized the business. They had actually created the first prepared baking mix that was ever produced for commercial use. And of course, they retooled it for mass production. And of course, Jiffy Mix is a household name.
And we think the biscuits here are going to be a lot better than those early biscuits that guy tried to make, because you said you made them from here.
That's
But
right.
yeah, as I said, they used to give tours. They don't anymore. But this is still family run by the Holmes family. People don't realize that. They told us they get offers every day to be bought out by conglomerates. They want to keep it a family business in Chelsea, which is a really rare thing today with such a successful company.
This is one of the original boxes.
Oh, yeah.
And the name, of all things, comes from the fact that Mabel's parents had a cook. And she would say, breakfast will be ready in a jiffy. And that always was near and dear to her heart.
That's a great, I love that, the name. Now, John and I went up to Bay City to watch them turn sugar beets into sugar. And this was fascinating, you guys. In the thumb, it used to be all lumber. That was the big industry. And they basically cut down all the trees. And the thumb needed another source of revenue. Somebody went over to Germany and brought back sugar beet seeds to someone at Michigan State. And so all the depleted land, they started growing sugar beets. And this became a cash crop. And all of a sudden, sugar factories sprung up all over Michigan. And there used to be many, but now there's just one. And Pioneer and Big Chief are in Bay City. They're the same. You used to maybe use one or the other. It's all just Pioneer now. But folks, look at this, a mountain of sugar beets. It was incredible to watch them. They chop them, they heat them, they process them. It's an all-natural process. They don't dye it. That white is a natural thing. These beets are white inside. They look like a regular beet, but they're actually white inside. And the whole town smells like beets. I mean, and that's when they're processing it. But it's a fascinating thing to go through the factory. They make 1.5 billion pounds of sugar a year. They're the third largest sugar company in America. And as I like to say, you know, a beet is a vegetable, right? So, you know, when you're eating sugar, you're really eating vegetables. So keep that in mind,
Eat your
especially if you're
vegetables,
using
right.
Pioneer.
We love this story, Red Pelican Mustard, which was kind of on hiatus for a little while, but David Corneli, the grandson of the founder, has brought it back, and it's really a very good mustard. His grandfather, you see him here, is Henry Sabe. He came from Belgium in 1912. He was going to make his fortune in America, so he booked passage on the Titanic. Well, to his good fortune, there was a coal strike on, and he wasn't going to wait. He got passage on another ship. When he got to New York, he read about what happened to the Titanic. He was a happy man. He went to Detroit, and he started making his famous honey hot mustard, and he made it in the house. And apparently it was absolutely so pungent and overpowering, his wife made him make it from then on in the garage. Yeah. He also had yellow mustard, and it was so popular in Detroit that it soon became the official mustard at Navin Field, a.k.a. Tiger Stadium.
Right.
So it's back now. It's been around for 101 years, and it's a great mustard. It really is.
Well, we just want to end this by saying that there's some places we think you could visit that are wonderful. There's a peanut shop in Lansing. There's Ray's Ice Cream in Royal Oak. And we were saying before about Calder's Dairy that in Flat Rock, you can actually go, they have a farm there, and it's open every day, and you can go and watch them milk the cows and make ice cream. So there's a whole section of places that we think are worth going to.
Right.
And on that, we wanted to end on time, and we will go to the next slide, which is, there I am eating cherry pie. We'd love to hear from you. Here's our email address, classicmichiganfood@gmail.com, and our social media, Classic Michigan Food, Facebook and Instagram. And with that, we have, like we said, we have way more stories, but we appreciate your kind attention, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, we would love to answer any questions anybody has. And there must be or you'd like to hear about your favorite Michigan food. Yes, young man. It took us about 2 years, and we went around to a lot of these places and tried the food and interviewed people. Some were harder to get interviews than others, especially if they were owned by corporations. It's hard to get through the layers, like John with Kellogg's and yeah.
The publisher was kind of surprised because he said, you're going to have trouble getting this, going through corporate layers. And in fact, Gerber is owned by Nestle, but they were very nice.
Yeah.
It was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
We talked to One Shop Wonders, and we talked to these huge companies. You had a question?
Wait.
Oh. Cole's frozen garlic bread question.
Well, we're streaming now. We have a reason. There you go.
I wanted to know about the Cole's frozen bread.
Yeah.
Why did they call it Texas toast?
Oh, God,
Well,
what a great
they
question.
didn't invent the name Texas toast. That's a form of something they create, and they started making it as a frozen product because Texas toast is something that you can get elsewhere, but they have a frozen brand of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wait, one. Here you go. Here you go, sir.
Ponderosa.
Right. It's a thick.
Oh, my
it's a
God, you
very
remember
thick kind of
Ponderosa.
slice, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you say Ponderosa at the CHAA? Is that
I don't
all right?
We used to go there all the time when I was a kid, Ponderosa.
Tuesday nights they had a special.
Oh, my God.
Ooh.
We went on Tuesday nights, Beth. It's like we're one person. Yes, it was ribeye night, I believe.
Anybody
Did you have a
else?
question?
I know you mentioned Leto's pasties. Are there firms like that ship pasties?
Yes, most
Yes.
of the pasty places will ship, actually.
And that was one of the criteria that we used. Is like, will you ship? Because we had to establish criteria. Like the companies had to be more than 20 years old. They had to be available in stores, and we wanted them to be able to ship.
That's right, because there's a lot of little companies that you'd have to just go there. We wanted to make these things available to people. So most of the brands in this book, almost all of them, you can get either at a store or you can order it online. But as we were explaining earlier, we were so into these stories, as you can tell, we completely overwrote the book, and the publisher made us take a third of it out. So we're like cutting. So we think we have a third way to volume 2.
Yeah,
So
there you go. Right, yeah. Eat your way to
it's
volume
a very
2.
heavy book. So, yeah.
I heard somewhere that Alyssa Slotkin's grandfather, great-grandfather
Right.
started
High-grade
Ballpark
Ballpark
Franks. Do you
Franks.
know any story about that?
Yes, high-grade Ballpark Franks. They actually started out making them in New York, making the meat for Nathan's Hot Dogs. Maybe you've heard of Nathan's Hot Dogs. Then they moved to Detroit, and they started making a hot dog that could be sold in the stadium. So they were only sold in Tiger Stadium. And then I love this. They had a brainstorming session one weekend. They said, well, we want to sell these in stores, so we need to come up with a name for these hot dogs that are only sold in the baseball stadium. And they came up with the name Ballpark Franks. So much for that. But and there's a famous ad campaign, they plump when you cook them.
Right, and that was part of the reason that they designed that particular Frank, because they wanted to come up with something that didn't shrivel while they were steaming at the ballpark.
Right.
So because they plumped, they were like, oh, we're going to use these.
One of the best places we went to was Kowalski. We saw him stuffing kielbasa before Easter. Kielbasa is very big at Easter, so that was fascinating. And that's been in, Kowalski's been, how long have they been in Hamtramck?
104 years.
Yeah, that's another family-run business. And they invented the Hunter sausage. The category, they actually invented Hunter sausage. And the guy that runs Kowalski said they found a 50-year-old package of Hunter sausage in his grandfather's jacket. And I said, well, did you try it? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, I want to know if it was still good. And that's another wonderful family-owned company, Kowalski.
But
Yeah.
by the same token, we interviewed the Bacheris family, who have Bacheris coffee, which if you go to Big Boy, that's the coffee you're drinking. And they are in Highland Park. and the military had used their coffee, and someone found a 50-year-old can of their
That's
coffee,
right.
and they drank it and said it was
So it's still
fantastic
pretty good.
after
yeah.
50 years. So
That was the fun thing, though, you guys, is that there's so many of these are family-run companies that have been around for generations, and meeting these families and how did they survive, you know, in the business world. So it was really gratifying.
right. Anybody else?
Here,
Yes.
Hold
Okay.
Wow.
Sorry about the Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
Been to, and I've probably been to the tour 50 times, because every time we'd have friends or relatives, we'd go on the tour of Kellogg's. And I can remember they always had a girl who was your master of ceremony, and they'd take you around and show you. And then I remember the day that they said we're stopping the tours
Oh, yeah.
because they said of industrial espionage.
That's
They
right.
Exactly.
steal our
That is
cornflakes.
why.
Right. Yeah, they didn't want the processing to be too public because today there's a lot of concern about industrial espionage. Obviously, and that was just the very beginning of it. But unfortunately, it was that, and there were safety concerns. There's always been safety concerns. There are places you could still tour though, and we talked about a few of them. Kilwins, you could still take a tour. Gilbert's, you can take a tour.
Yeah, but there's very few that you can still go to.
We were able to arrange Michigan Sugar, but that's not constantly allowed. You gotta kind of arrange that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, yes, sir.
What? Just so the streamers
That's
can
coming
hear.
with that
And there were
microphone.
about 30-some people listening. There you go.
I know you mentioned Kogel's Meats in
Yes.
Flint, is it? And
Serve
there's a
the curve. Right.
tie-in between that and some of the Coney dog.
They are used by some of the Coney
As a topping.
places, but it's interesting to note that the Lafayette and the American, their hot dogs are both made by Dearborn Sausage,
Yeah.
and they're totally different recipes, and no one's allowed to know what they are.
That's right.
And their chilies are also made by National. And National makes the chili for all the Coney Islands except Kirby's. But Kogel does make Coney dogs for some of the other Coney
Right,
Islands.
right.
But what I was referring to, well, basically, I wanted to know, does your book discuss the Coney dog
Yes.
companies?
We do have
But
some
also
stuff
I-
about that in there. Yeah, yeah.
I think Kogel's is used in the sauce, the chili sauce that's put on some of the Coney dogs. Is what
The
Kogel does
Kogel,
not make sauce. They only make hot
the
dogs.
meat
Oh, the
used
meat is
in the
that's been sort of disproved that they use hot dogs in the Coney thing. You know, a lot of them actually use beef heart is the real.
Beef heart, yeah.
That's the key to a real Coney sauce. Jackson claims to have. We have something in the book that Jackson's. There's a place called Todorof's that claims to be before Lafayette and American, that they were the first Coney in Michigan. So again, this is a big debate, and Flint claims to have invented the Coney. So
and we should say it's limited because if you just have to go to a Coney shop, they're not included. If you can get these by mail order
yeah,
or,
we don't have restaurants really
yeah.
per se.
because National Coney chili,
sell
you
all
can
over
get
the
at the grocery
country.
store, right?
And you can also get it at the Detroit airport.
Right.
They told us some guy comes and he always has a layover in Detroit so he can go and eat a Coney at National's outlet at the airport
Right.
before he goes on another flight.
See?
Don't sit next to that guy.
Yeah. You got to love a guy who loves a good Coney. Anybody
Do you have
else?
a question? Okay.
Going once, going
I'm sure
twice.
everybody wants snacks. Everybody, thank you so much. We'll
Thank
be
you.
selling books
Thank you.
over there, but thank you so much. And